rebrand HR employee services as a place that, there's outreach, we just don't sit behind closed doors and just, wait for you to come to us. So really building on reestablishing some trust and some care and customer service within the organization. Any questions?
Well, I guess I have a few questions.
Okay.
I guess we entered into a contract and change orders nearly $750,000, and you had a scope. How do you feel? Have you reached your goals of your scope? Or?
Yes, we've accomplished 100% of what we set out to do. Yes.
That's good.
So, and we will be providing Derek and the authority with a final report.
In-house or something you're going to give us a proposal for doing?
Well, these things are things that I'm having conversations with Sandy. So Sandy joins us. You've not been introduced, right?
No, and let me take a moment if I can. So part of this transition, part of this process in terms of hiring Faison Consulting was to get us to the point where we don't need consultants anymore, where we're bringing HR back in-house. And so that is exactly what they've done or helped us do. We went from, we now have, we're short one person in HR and the analyst, but we have a director now. And Sandy West, Sandy, can you come on up? Sandy West joins us 2 weeks now. 2 weeks, comes to us from Tulane. And Sandy, you want to step up to the mic and just give give your, 1 minute resume?
Welcome, Sandy.
Thank you. I'm glad to be here. As Derek mentioned, I joined you guys coming from Tulane University, where I was there for about 26 years. Kind of grew up in HR, started off in the benefits area. I stayed there for about 10 years, maybe a little bit more. Worked my way up through that organization into the director. So very familiar with benefits and the running of a benefits division. And then the last, as well as build on it going forward.
Okay, so these next steps to consider are things that you're going to be working on?
Yes.
Okay, thank you.
As with the entire team. So these are things, this is not anything that falls out with, it all falls in line with Sandy's skill set. One of the great things about having us on board, other than what we've done, is understanding, having an outlook of where the organization is in their business process, and finding someone with the skill set to continue building in this particular stage. And when we identified Sandy as a candidate, I felt that she was perfectly aligned with understanding how to build this function and bring functions together to create that communication and those synergies for operational efficiency. So we are leaving you guys in really great hands. So.
And I've tried to turn on the fire hose intermittently. I'll just give her, turn it on for a little while, then cut it off, and then turn it back on. I'm excited to have Sandy here. It's going to be a great addition.
Sandy comes from an organization with 6,000 employees, 17,000 students across multiple countries. So she is very capable.
Welcome aboard.
Yes. So if you guys think about going global, she can go with you. No, Derek?
3 parishes are good right now.
Okay.
Sandy, just so you know, we're the finance committee, but we primarily manage the money for the administrative functions of the organization. So if you need anything, you'll probably be coming to us, and we look forward to seeing you when you figure out what you need and how you need to move forward. We'll be ready to assist you if we can.
Thank you, sir.
Any other questions? All right. Thank you very much.
Thank you.
Good job. All right, moving on to insurance coverages, which all renew January 1st, or these lists renew January 1st.
This stays here, but it's stuck. It's frozen. There we go.
We got the hard
Did you get
copies.
the email of showing all the various insurance requirements we have?
I did, yes.
Good.
That's all right.
Ladies and gentlemen, good morning. Again, I'm Matt Bird with Arthur J. Gallagher. Y'all have the presentation that I put together, which is basically a snapshot of the coverages that are renewing now. Many of these are still part of a process that we started a while ago with consolidating and moving expiration dates. So I originally had set out to try and put together a smaller document, but with a lot of the exposures and the dates changing, what you have in front of you hopefully should answer some questions as well. How would y'all like me to do this? Just run through them one by one and give a snapshot of what we're looking at?
Sure. And I'll ask questions as we go through one by one.
Sure. So for the public officials liability, which is Flood Protection Authority as a whole first. The public officials liability, that policy is moving. The last term was March 16 of 18 through 1/1 of 19. So now we'll be renewing that policy for a full 12 months. There are no significant changes in terms of exclusions or coverage. It was about 2 years ago that we added in a defense outside of the limit of $10 million in addition to the $10 million limit that we have, and that is moving forward. One of the items to point out is that on our application, we had a roughly 18.5% increase in the exposure basis, which is a revenue figure and operating budget. The premium increased by a percentage of 4.3%. So we were able to keep the premium increase below the exposure increase, if that makes sense on the pricing standpoint. And there is an offer for cyber liability coverage as well. I would think that would be one that we could probably talk about a little bit outside to discuss the pros and cons and what that coverage is looking to do, different than what our employment practices policy does, which has some various components in there that may deal with electronic media. This is more about security of our data, the identifying information that we may have on individuals or entities. What would happen if that were to get out? What is our cost in terms of providing people with credit monitoring, et cetera? There's just a lot of pieces in the cyber world, and I'm sure, as y'all are probably very aware, that is a very emerging market in terms of protecting cyber. We may not be Target or Walmart, but we still have exposures there that are worth considering from a coverage standpoint. The workers' compensation. Go ahead. Yep.
Before we move on, the 18.5% increase, that's our budget basically because of the pumps and other responsibilities we've taken on.
Yes, sir, and we get those numbers from the authority. Kelly, if you want to chime in on this one, we've had an increase in our overall expenditures and what we're doing operationally. If we have a different number that we want to submit, we can do so. I believe I don't want to quote off the top of my head what the number was.
Is this total revenue, Matt, or is this just the authority's revenue? Do you know?
This is going to be the total revenue of the entities, because all of the districts fall underneath this policy as an insured as well, or the operations of the districts, because those decisions are made by the board of which this policy covers.
Okay.
What kind of loss runs have we had here? Has the board ever been sued? Or I'm sure we've been sued. But
we have.
have we ever lost?
That's the most important question.
We've had some claims expenses, but the answer is we have not had a significant claim that there was a. We've had claims expenses to defend allegations that then proved to not be one where we would pay a liability out for, if that makes sense. Yeah, we could, as you know, you can sue anybody, defend it, and
we pay for lawyers to defend themselves under this policy. I got you. And it's a $10 million policy?
10 million plus 10 million, yes. So you have 10 million in defense outside of the limit, and then you would have 10 million to go towards a potential award.
Okay.
Or the other 10 would go towards the attorneys and just start eroding that last 10, but
I got you.
Well, why is this policy priced based on revenue?
So all policies of insurance have to figure out some way to get an exposure basis. Revenue is the one that this policy most typically would use. We wouldn't use an auto count or property valuations. Revenue gives them the best understanding of how much is going through that entity and how much exposure there may be. If there is a different way that you would like to try to rate it, we can certainly have a conversation with the underwriters about that, but revenue is the typical way that these policies are done.
The public officials liability policy covers what?
I'm sorry?
What does it cover?
So without
Summarize.
going to cover allegations made against the board and the members of the board for the decisions that you make that somebody may or may not like and chooses to sue the board. That's what this policy is intended to cover primarily.
That's primarily what it covers.
It is covering the board and the decisions that the board makes, correct?
Okay. I don't have any further questions. Move on to workers' comp.
So on the workers' comp, when we consolidated policies a while back, one of the big items that we did was we took all of the employee, and through the HR function as well, we took all of the employees of the district and moved them underneath the main authority, leaving East Jefferson with only police officers, Orleans with only police officers, and Lake Bourne with no employees. So in that, we had this policy take on the majority of the payroll last year, and the estimated premium was just over $266,000. The renewal premium is coming in at $274,000 or just over $274,000. Under workers' compensation, these are rates that are filed with the Department of Insurance, and we put our payroll class code, the payroll for it, divided by 100, multiplied against the rate. There were two significant changes in filed rates, and I indicated those two class codes. One of them is the irrigation, and the other one is the park, not otherwise classified code. So we've had some conversations already with Derek and Kelly. One of the items that had occurred in the past when the three districts were separated was while we had the same auditor from our workers' comp carrier, we weren't necessarily getting similar exposures at each of the three districts in the same code. So one of them may have been a $7 rate. One of them may have been a $5 rate for a similar item. So when this audit comes up, February, March, when we get it scheduled, one of the big items that we're going to be doing is going through the rates that we have now, deciding whether we believe that those individuals should be coded differently through what's called the scopes manual, and then working with the auditor to make sure that we are paying an appropriate rate for our employees. Generally, this process would lead to determining that somebody may not be a $10 rate. This person is actually a project manager and they're a $3 rate, whatever it may be. But that would leave the districts moving forward. We pretty much have a relatively consistent operation. If we were to open up some new division, we'll figure out what those people are, but determining what everybody that we have now falls into would be important from an HR component and also from a premium component. So just to let you know that estimated expiring of 266 will audit on actuals, and hopefully it will audit on actuals down based on changing some of those rate classifications, and the renewal estimate would then do the same thing. Last, and this will go for all of the workers' comp policies, all four. You guys had requested that we move them to what's called an annual pay, and those have all been done. So I think that was a lot of a Kelly Janelle request. So,
and we are actively involved.
What's up, guys?
Setting
in this
up the
tutorial, I will show you how to
codes.
fix the black screen you are getting when trying to launch your
Districts
browser.
and in the right
Now you can open up
classifications.
OBS and set up your window capture from Chrome.
Operations and
This should
Yeah.
fix the black screen issue.
work together, so that way when we get a new employee,
What's up,
We know
guys?
exactly.
In this tutorial, I will
Right.
show you how to fix the black screen you are getting
Well,
when
and it's
trying
part
to
of the
record
bigger
your Chrome browser
picture
with OBS
as well.
Studio. So
When
first of all,
we did
open
the
up
HR
Chrome and
brief
head
just a
to your
couple minutes
settings.
ago.
As you can see,
They
this is
mentioned,
From
this
here,
this
open up the
major
advanced
push on
settings
the
and scroll all
operations
the
and
way
maintenance
down.
staff, the
Here, you want to
consolidation
disable the
and
hardware acceleration option and restart
updating
your
of the
browser.
org chart
Now you can
and
open
the
up OBS
standardizing.
and set up
Because
your
right
window
now we
capture
are
from
still
Chrome. This should fix the black screen issue. I hope this short tutorial advanced settings and scroll all the way down. Here, you want to disable the hardware acceleration option and restart your browser. Now you can open up OBS and set up your window capture from Chrome. This should fix the black screen issue. I hope this short tutorial helped you out. Leave a comment if you have any questions and see you in the next one.
And cheaper.
Well, and
Generally, yeah.
Correct.
you got 50 classifications, which are all $7 rates. You can just kind of fit
Yeah.
your guys in one of those.
Yeah.
Yep.
All right. Sounds good to me. No further questions there.
Okay, two more for the authority as a whole. We have the pollution liability policy. The expiring policy was, again, another short-term policy from March 10 through January of 19. The renewal at 12, I'm sorry, and that one was 43,266. The renewal premium is coming in at 53,289 at 12 months. One of the main components that is missing is not only the term, but during the last term, we added on the PCCP facilities to the site pollution coverage. So the rate annualized is a flat renewal moving forward, but the difference in the premium, again, is the term and the addition of the 3 new facilities.
And something I want the Finance Committee to keep in mind when we get to the budget to actuals that will be kind of tied into this is one of the things that we in Finance have been struggling with is whose books should these expenses rest on? So, for example, PCCP, the policy is with CEFLA itself, which means it allocates to all districts rather than being with Orleans levy district. There are some questions. I mean, at the end, it is the total is the same, but exactly how to allocate that is instead, and also things like general liability, who's like how much of that goes on the authorities' books versus the districts, is something I just was talking to Matt that we need to kind of look at because it may make more sense for PCCP insurance to be with Orleans, even though EJ East Jefferson Parish pays a portion of it. We could still just keep that in mind when we get to budget to actual discussions.
And that's part of that ongoing sort of learning process as we go through this consolidation and regionalization. And we'll be in a better position, I guess, 3 months from now, roughly, when we go into the budgeting process.
Mm-hmm.
So this policy would cover any spills or releases of regulated substances into the water, land?
Yes, and the cleanup and remediation of them.
Okay.
And we, when we added on the PCCP facilities, we made sure that there were no significant exclusions related to the water being where it is in relation to that. I mean, the EJ facility is a very different animal than PCCP in terms of where it is geographically and getting into the water of Lake Pontchartrain. We made sure that there wouldn't be any issues with that release if it happened.
About mold or asbestos?
It's going to depend on whether you're talking about a property coverage or
like the old pump stations at Lake Bourne, I'm sure they have asbestos insulation on some of their floor tiles have asbestos in them.
So then let me back up. What we are looking at on this policy primarily is the underground storage tanks and the tanks that we have at those facilities. So if you're referencing something perhaps at a Lake Bourne pumping station that does not have a storage tank or fuels or other items that we thought would be able to be released, that's not necessarily contemplated here.
Okay. All right.
And then the auto physical damage is the only item that may somewhat remain in limbo today. We are expecting to still get in 2 other options on this. We have our renewal option. The main item to note is that the values of our automobiles have increased from a total insured value of just over $3.2 million to just over $4.4 million. So I point that out to then go back to the premium. We had a short-term policy in the last term from July 1st of 2018 to January 1st coming up of this year. The premium was just over $30,000. The renewal premium is coming in for the 12 months at just over $74,000. But again, the valuation of those autos has also increased. So if that is something that we can certainly continue to take a look at, whether we want to scrub some vehicles off. We have scrubbed a lot of vehicles off over the last year and a half, where we had come, to Derek and Janelle and said there's no reason to buy physical damage coverage on an auto that you've got listed for $5,000 when you've got a $1,000 deductible. We're trying to just purchase physical damage coverage on vehicles that have higher valuations. But again, that schedule is always something that the board can make a decision as to where it wants to determine its risk tolerance.
You're showing roughly a 33% increase in the values of auto physical damage. Have we had a 33% increase? What's the new equipment? What brought on a 33% increase in the value of our autos?
We continue to buy more vehicles every year, and I would say that a part of it as well was continuing to bring more of the districts together and bringing those vehicles that may have been on a different schedule into another schedule. But again, Herb, that's where we can look at that schedule and decide whether, one, we're off, or two, whether we want to take some vehicles off of it. As I said, of all the items, this is the one that I'd like to remain open, as we'll have some other options coming in on.
It just seems the 33% increase in value in a one-year period just seems.
Matt, did auto go up sort of trend-wise regionally and nationally as well?
Auto is by far the worst line of insurance in the marketplace right now, yes. The physical damage only component, though, is not trending up the same as the liability side is. So that's not the answer to the increase as much as it truly is the schedule. And Herb, I can get you the copy of that as well to take a look at the year-over-year changes.
Yeah, that's probably something we need to scrub, because that's, Herb, you're right. That's a big increase in value, and we haven't purchased that many vehicles. I'd like to take a look at that.
Yeah,
we haven't purchased.
We need to look into that. I mean, the premium has gone up on an annualized basis about 25% annualized, and we got a 33% increase in value. So the premium is proportional is okay.
Sure.
It's just I don't understand how we did 1.2 million
Extra,
more
right.
automobiles and vehicles. Is this just automobiles, or is this all of our physical facilities, our tractors and everything else, or is this strictly automobile?
No, the equipment is elsewhere.
I don't understand how we got 1.2 million extra in automobiles in 1 year.
We'll get together and get the list from last year and the list from this year. I mean, we can certainly go through it, and we won't make any decisions on putting that policy in force until it's right.
Okay. It doesn't include trailers.
It can. I actually don't know the answer off the top of my head to how many trailers we may or may not have on there. But if we wanted physical damage on a trailer, this is where it would be.
Depends on the trailer.
What about rental? Rental, if we rent a car or truck, or does it apply only to vehicles we own, or?
We do have hired auto physical damage coverage, yes.
Good. Because we sometimes go to conferences or training out of town and rent vehicles.
Right, and what that does is ultimately it just sets a limit. I'll give an example of $50,000 for a hired vehicle, whatever it may be, because it's not a scheduled auto.
You gotta get the.
You go.
There you go, yeah. All right.
Okay, shifting away from the authority to Orleans Levy District, the workers' comp for this one, again, is just for our police officers. And again, as I always say, workers' comp they are filed rates. We have our policies through LWCC. and we are looking at what our payroll exposures are. The expiring premium was just shy of $56,000. The renewal premium is coming in just over $53,000. So a small decrease in that, but that is due to our payroll and filed rates with the carrier. Then we have Reserve Officer AD&D. That was also a short policy that went into effect on February 15 of this year and will expire on January 1st, 2019. The renewal premium for that was $13.86. The renewal premium is $15.80. Expiring exposure was $20, and the renewal is $20 as well. So ultimately, there's no net change in cost per individual on that renewal. East Jefferson, same items. The workers' comp policy went down just a little bit on those police officers, and we have the same reserve AD&D. There is a change in exposure on EJ. We had 16 on last year's application. We have 24 on this year. But I guess I say the price per person, which is the exposure basis, is the same.
I thought we had fewer officers in EJ than Orleans.
We do on active, but on reserves, we have more at EJ.
Okay.
What is the reason police officers are separated from the other employees for workers' comp? Plus the higher potential liability for...
Well, that was just part of the my understanding is twofold. One, that the authority itself cannot employ the police.
That's correct. Statutorily, the authority can only right now, the authority can only directly employ the superintendent. So the officers themselves for the two different departments are on the subordinate levy district books and have to be segregated that way.
Does that answer your question, Herb? Yep. Which brings us last to Lake Bourne Levy District workers' compensation. So this policy was shifted to an if any policy. We don't have any active payroll running through this policy. However, we have a significant amount of trailing dividends that are going to continue to be being returned to us from the carrier. So for that reason, we have left this workers' comp policy in place and in force. In the event that an employee were injured and made the allegation that they were a Lake Bourne employee and ultimately the courts decided that they were, the policy would still be there to cover them as well. But eventually, we would expect this policy to trail out.
There are no police officers at Lake Bourne, active or reserve, so that's why this is different. And this is referring to, older and all the maintenance staff that are now part of the consolidated authority. So it's just to catch the trailing stuff like Matt talked about.
Those are the major renewals for now. The next page is just a snapshot of what we have upcoming. We're going to be processing through these renewals. As I mentioned, getting together with Kelly and staff from HR to work through the scopes manual and determine where we need everybody for the audit. I spoke with Derek about this the other day. We built a new program that is primarily geared towards ensuring the physical damage and equipment breakdown components of levy systems. And so Derek and I spoke about that as the Corps turned over those valuations to us to try and determine whether or not that is something that we want to look at and where we would deploy that. We'll be re-engineering the valuations on PCCP. With the MOU, we have a couple of additional hurdles to move through with returning the property insurance ownership of those buildings to Orleans. And the flood insurance policies are in the name of Non-Flood Protection Asset Management Authority. We'll be needing to get those shifted into the name of Orleans, the property owner. We would expect to be finalized with the majority of all this in April and May, and then would basically just shift into ongoing servicing through the remainder of the year up until the 2020 renewals.
Longshoreman harbor workers' comp coverage, do we have any? Or if any?
We are if any, but we have it on all of our policies. So in the event that there was an allegation, we would drive that claim where it's.
Off the barge, we would probably have to have the coverage.
As we say, if the trier of fact determines that they are a longshoreman,
Yeah.
they are a longshoreman. So, but we do have that coverage trigger through LWCC. Yes.
All right, and the LWCC bills is monthly, and the others are all upfront premium.
Well, LWCC at request, we've now shifted those all to annual.
Yeah, we did have 2 districts that were monthly that'll end as of December, and then beginning January, it'll all shift to annually. So we're kind of still transitioning from monthly to annually for this particular year.
Good. Any further questions? Go ahead.
A couple questions. One, have we thought about self-insuring?
Well, I can answer that by saying we do continue to step our deductibles and retentions higher. So that is a component of self-insuring, which is the higher you take that retention, the more you are self-insuring. I think that is a great conversation to continue having, which is what is the risk tolerance of the authority and where we want to go. To shift back over to auto physical damage, what is the likelihood of us losing 10 vehicles in a year? If they were all worth $50,000, would we be okay with that? And if the answer is yes, then we don't pay the $80,000 of annual premium to the carrier. So I'm going to answer your question. We can also do self-insurance through our deductibles and retentions by increasing those levels.
Okay.
So I think the answer is we need to look at that as part of the more holistic approach that we've been working towards.
Yeah. What did we make it on PCCP? What did we make our deductible?
500,000.
500,000.
Right.
That's what we kind of felt our.
Self-insured.
Yeah.
What the policy has gone, if I'm calculating correctly, for the non-workers' comp's gone from 161 to 195.
I'm sorry. Which policy?
All the policies minus workers' comp, because workers' comp's kind of set.
So I think that's everything else besides workers' comp, Matt. So
161 what was the old premium, and now it's 195, if my math is correct.
And it probably is, and that was the reason that in numerous ones of these, I tried to outline that we had some short-term policies throughout. For example, the public officials liability short-term was 57.7. The renewal is 67.6. However, that difference is one because of the 12-month term as opposed to the short term, and then we did have that little over 4% rate increase. A lot of the short-term policies that are now finally going to be on the full 12 is as a portion of that difference.
Okay. That was my next question. Was what was the major problem with having the premiums go up? And you're saying most of them is because we went from short-term to long-term.
Other than the rate increase on the public officials liability, the answer is the terms is what is driving those differences. And then on the auto physical damage, the values.
The last question is, do we as a flood authority carry flood insurance?
We do on most of our facilities.
Facilities that we're required to? Okay.
Well, whether required to or just because it's probably an appropriate coverage to have, I've always joked that I would think that would be a very interesting front page of the news story that the Flood Protection Authority doesn't carry flood insurance on a building, but that's just...
I think that happens. That's all I got.
All right.
Matt, has there been any conversation, and I'm sorry to ask you this right now, it's just on the top of my head, about the other policies and moving those renewal dates to January? I think we've had some discussions like the crime and the some of the other.
So after this, and then we will get the non-flood transitioned in, and that will be to the 1/1 when we're done with it. After that, the only policies that will have non-1/1 dates are flood insurance policies, which are various, and Lake Bourne, which has its hull, vessel pollution, and P&I policy in July. That was determined to just leave that as it is. we didn't want to really shift things around on Lakeborne's finances, although that's a small policy. We can move it to 1/1 if you'd like, but that was the only.
Okay, that's all that's left, because I see crime and property, that will go 1/1/1 on 2020, so.
The board may remember, we were all over the place in terms of renewals. When you step back and looked at all the separate policies per district and the types of policies, this has been an effort to get it all 1/1, so it's logical. It doesn't, come smack in the middle of storm season, which we had some of that going on as well in July renewals. So this has been to try to get it consistent for planning purposes and just making sense of it all.
Been a long process.
Yeah, I got a question. Going back to human resources, do we do annual reviews all at the same date, or do we do them based on their hire date?
All in the same time period.
Yeah, same time. They're all due in August, end of August every year, and because the fiscal year ends 30 June.
Okay, I guess the two action items we really discussed here were confirming our auto value.
Yes.
And the second thing was, and we don't need to do this by January 1st, but probably by our audit date, which will be in February. Workers' comp.
Yeah.
The audit itself, which, yeah.
And then that will set it for 2019, basically how our audit.
I might be missing what you said on
The workers' comp,
The
workers' comp.
Codes to make sure we're consistent across the board, et cetera. And we don't need this on January 1/19 policy, but we need it by our audit date in February.
And that audit date will then be truing up what we had for 18 to 19.
Right.
And then if there are significant changes, we would then make those changes for the 19 to 20 policy and hopefully, get a credit back we would have already annually paid.
Yeah.
Or maybe it'll show up later, but yes.
It'll be audited later anyway, so.
Yeah.
Right.
And that we'll coordinate with Kelly to schedule the auditor, and we've already indicated to them that we probably will need an extra day. We're going to determine what we believe those codes are, compare them to what we currently have, and then fight to get them where they're supposed to be. Obviously within the scopes manual.
Okay.
All right.
Yeah. Any other issues or? But I won't be here on Thursday, but I guess y'all can relate to the board.
Kelly, can you work with Matt and set up to take a look at the auto?
Yeah.
I know you're already looking at workers' comp and have that
Yeah,
plan.
no, I'll get with Matt and look at the auto.
So I'll
With
email
Janelle, too.
the prior schedule and the current schedule, I guess, to Janelle, Kelly, and Derek, and they can forward it, where we can talk through it, and y'all can see the differences from last year, and we can figure out what vehicles were still there, what left, and what's new.
Yeah.
And
Perfect.
go from that.
And I guess for our resolution on Thursday, we'll have to have some kind of number in there. Maybe we can make it a range if we need to from.
Maybe a not to exceed or something like that.
Yep.
Whatever the number is. And if we can have a chance to reduce it, then we'll do so. And Derek
We got, while all the other policies came in, we got a little bit caught up on, just Thanksgiving vacations, and we are well over 30 days away from the renewal, and so we're well ahead of time. But that also kind of got to where an underwriter sees a January 1 file, and they say, "Well, I can get to that next week, right?" So anyway,
well, but the board's going to have to approve the budget.
it will.
Yeah.
We will, whether it's renewal where we are or with a different carrier, we'll have a firm recommendation before the board meeting. Yes.
All right. So on Thursday, we'll recommend we move forward, but under those general guidelines. So unless y'all have some other opinion.
And just for the record, on the auto physical damage, we currently carry a deductible of $1,000.
Really?
So we'll look at that this week.
Yeah.
All
Gentlemen,
right.
thanks.
Sounds good. Thank you. Discussion of property and casualty insurance coverage. Is that
Matt, you may want to stay up there.
as well? Is that on in here?
I don't think there was
Any kind of?
I don't think there was any sort of paperwork, Mark. I think you just wanted to have a general discussion
Yeah,
about
this
it.
is on the